Welcome to the Moon Manifesting Podcast. I'm Kyra, Howearth, your host. Here on the show, we talk all about manifesting your dreams with the power of the moon so you can use the cosmic energy to transform your life. If you are aged 24, 36, 48, 60, or any of these multiples of 12, or you're maybe approaching these ages, this episode is for you. I'm talking all about Jupiter returns in this episode, which is a really exciting time of opportunity and growth in your life. So if you are one of those ages, you're currently entering into a new cycle of opportunity, of growth, and you might be feeling this new beginning starting in your life. And in today's episode, I'm going to be diving right into what is a Jupiter return, how to harness this energy, and what to expect for your Jupiter return. Welcome back to the Moon Manifesting Podcast. My name's Kyra Howearth, and today we're talking all about Jupiter returns, and this is something that's really quite meaningful to me at the moment because actually right now I'm going through my Jupiter return, and it's really just been so fascinating diving into this energy of Jupiter returns through my own personal lens, and observing what's coming up for myself during this time. And I'm really excited to share what I've been learning about Jupiter returns with you all, because chances are, if you're listening, you may be also around my age, maybe you're also not, but maybe you're also one of those multiples of 12, maybe 24, maybe 48, or approaching those ages. And this is a really exciting topic. We go through our Jupiter return approximately every 12 years. Jupiter takes about 12 years to go right around the zodiac. So your Jupiter return is when Jupiter comes back to that exact same degree that Jupiter was when you were born. So when I was born back in 1989, Jupiter was in Gemini at, for me, it's at 19 degrees Gemini. So at the moment, Jupiter is at 19 degrees Gemini. And you can look at it in a more sort of broad perspective at just looking at the zodiac sign of where your natal Jupiter is, so where Jupiter is on your natal chart. And whenever the transiting Jupiter is moving through that zodiac sign, this is actually a really lucky year for you. So Jupiter does take about 1 year to move through a zodiac sign. So some astrologers do believe that when Jupiter is in that same sign, that same zodiac sign as your natal Jupiter, then that entire year can actually just be really lucky. Jupiter being the planet of luck, abundance, growth, and joy, and all those good things. It's a very expansive planet. You can imagine just how much of those energies can be really present in your life as you're going through your Jupiter return, as you're kind of getting this double whammy of this Jupiter energy. So let's kind of go back a little bit, because maybe if you're listening right now, you're like, okay, but I don't know where my Jupiter is on my chart. So if that's you, if maybe you're a bit new to the Moon Manifesting Podcast, or new to astrology even in general, I suggest that you go onto a website where you can pull up a free astrology chart. There are a lot of websites out there. I do like astro-charts.com. They make it really easy to just put in your birth details and bring up your chart. If you don't know your time of birth for your Jupiter, it's not so important. Your time of birth does, of course, influence your chart, particularly for things like your rising sign and the houses on your chart. But if you don't know your time of birth, that's okay. You can just put in midday and it will still at least tell you where your Jupiter is, or where your Jupiter was at your time of birth. And that's really the most important thing that you're needing to know for today's episode, because if you have followed along with my podcast for a while, you know that I love to make these quite interactive, where you can follow along and read your chart as I'm going through and talking all about this stuff. So if you do want to pull up your chart now to find out where your natal Jupiter is, that will help you understand maybe are you going through your Jupiter return right now. If your natal Jupiter is in Gemini, then yeah, you could be going through your Jupiter return this year. Maybe if your Jupiter is in Cancer, then you'll know that, well, Cancer is the next sign after Gemini, so maybe next year will be your Jupiter return. So you can have a look at it on that really sort of basic level, just knowing that Jupiter moves through each zodiac sign about one per year. So you can kind of get a rough estimate of when you might expect your next Jupiter return. And of course, if, knowing that Jupiter takes 12 years to go right around the zodiac, you can think about it like, okay, around age 12, around age 24, around age 36, 48, 60, so forth. These are going to be the times approximately when you're going through your Jupiter return. In saying that, I've only just turned 35 this year, about 5 months ago now, and I'm going through my Jupiter return. I'm not 36 for another 7 months. So it's not always exact to those years, to those specific birthdays. So you may find that it fluctuates a little bit. So like your first Jupiter return, it might have been around age 11 or age 12. Your second Jupiter return might have been around ages 23 to 24. The third, as I'm going through now, around maybe age 35 to 36. So it can fluctuate a little. So just being mindful of that as well. So Jupiter, if you're not familiar with Jupiter, it is one of my favorite planets because it's such like a happy-go-lucky sort of energy. Jupiter is, I feel like it's a big magnet of abundance. It just really helps you attract the things that bring you joy, that help you grow, that help you feel abundant. It's a really positive energy, but there is also the sort of downside with Jupiter that sometimes we can lean into those things with excess, that like sometimes too much of a good thing is actually too much. So being mindful of that as you're going through your Jupiter return, that yes, sometimes it brings up a lot of good things. It's kind of like, eating cake, right? Like it's okay to have one slice, but do you really want to eat the whole cake? Well, yeah, you might want to, but are you going to regret it later? Maybe. And you can't like have like a whole cake like every single day either, right? I mean, you can, but you probably don't want to. Like it's not really good for your health and that sort of thing. Too much sugar and all that sort of stuff. So it's kind of the same with Jupiter. It can bring in this really positive energy, but it's also really important to just moderate that energy. Particularly with, if there is other things going on with the natal chart or the transits that might be influencing your Jupiter return, just being mindful that you're not having too much of a good thing. So what I want to talk about today, I'm going to be guiding you through how to read your Jupiter return chart, because this is something that I have been diving into over these past few months, and it is so fascinating. And I think I have spoken about Jupiter returns on the podcast back in season 1, and I can't think of which episode that was off the top of my head, so you will have to go through and search, but it was quite a while ago. And I did talk about Jupiter returns on a more sort of basic level back on that episode. So today's episode is kind of going into reading the Jupiter return chart on a bit of a deeper level, but if you do want to go back, the other episode I did, it may have even been back in like 2022 or something, it will cover a lot of other information that I won't go into in today's episode. So what we're going to be doing today is bringing up a Jupiter return chart. So I will get into that shortly. But what I want to go through first is just, talking a bit about Jupiter returns and what to kind of expect. So as I mentioned, your first Jupiter return often happens at around age 11 or age 12. And maybe if you think back to that age, what happened to you during that age? Like typically this is around the age that we might be finishing primary school or elementary school, depending on where in the world you are, what you call it, and then moving into high school, or I don't know what else you like might call it in America. Is that middle school perhaps? I'm not sure. But entering into that next phase, it's kind of when we start to maybe enter puberty. We might be starting to feel less like a child and starting to feel like we're entering into that next cycle of our lives. We're kind of evolving into that next version of ourselves. So for me, when I was around that age, I found out when my first Jupiter return was. It was back in 2001. I was in year 6, so I was in my last year of primary school, and I'm not actually sure what was significant for me with that Jupiter return. Like, as I was preparing for this episode, I was like, what actually happened? And I have no idea. Like, I can't go back like on my phone because I didn't have a phone back then. Like these days, I don't know about you guys, but if I need to jog my memory, like what happened back in such and such year, I look back through my photos on my phone. I don't have anything from 2001. We didn't have phones. So I actually don't know what happened during that time. Because it was in the middle of the school year. So for me, I'm not feeling like there was anything too significant, but I do know it was around that time that I possibly had done a like a scholarship exam to get into a selective high school for the following year. And I did actually end up getting that scholarship. I was able to go to probably one of the most expensive schools in our town, and it wouldn't have been possible if I hadn't have got this scholarship. Like, we just could not have afforded it. And I think I got like a 50% off scholarship, which literally saved my parents like tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars during my duration of high school. So I feel like that was quite abundant and quite lucky. But again, I just don't know of the exact timing, whether that kind of lined up, but it would have definitely been around that year for sure. So maybe there was something that happened for you with your first Jupiter return around ages 11 or 12 that maybe helped you start that new cycle. So yeah, having a think about that. So your second Jupiter return is around ages 23 to 24. And this is when, often we are leaving university. If we go to university after school, after finishing high school, if we are like having a 3 to 4 year degree, then usually by this age, we are finished with that and we are moving into our career. We're starting to enter adulthood. We might be even getting married or having kids at that age. When I was 24, I already had 2 kids. So that's not exactly true for me. I feel like I had other transits going on there that influenced that. But typically, these are the sorts of things that might happen. Now, I looked back on my second Jupiter return to find out the exact date that this happened. And that was actually when we literally moved from Brisbane back to Tamworth. So I grew up in Tamworth, and then I moved to Brisbane and met my husband, and we, after a while, we just got sick of the city life. Brisbane is a pretty big city in Australia, and Tamworth is a bit of a small, it's technically a city, but it's just, I like to call it a small town. It's like there's no traffic jams like you get in the cities, like no stop-start traffic. It's nothing like that. And it's a much more small town sort of vibe. You kind of, like, you walk down the street, you see people that you know. It's got a more like small town community feel. So anyway, that's what happened for me with my second Jupiter return. I moved back to my hometown, and that for me was the start of a new cycle. And anyway, so your third Jupiter return happens around ages 35 to 36. So that makes me realize that actually we've been living in Tamworth for 12 years now. So yeah, that's kind of what's happened in this last Jupiter cycle for me. So at ages 36, depending on like what's going on for you at that age, but this again might be maybe when you're having kids. If you're having kids later in life, this is often when you might be doing that. Again, you might be getting married. If you get married, later in life, this might be a time when that happens for you. This could also be a time when you step more into your career. If, like me, you had kids earlier, then maybe in your mid-30s, around your third Jupiter return, this is when you feel that freedom to be like, okay, my kids don't need me as much anymore. I'm entering the workforce or entering my career or something like that. And again, it could be something completely different depending on what's going on for you and your chart. But this is typically some of the things that might happen. So with my third Jupiter return that I'm going through now, it's quite interesting because as I was talking about my second Jupiter return being like when we moved to Tamworth, at the moment we are actually looking to move out of Tamworth, and like we're finishing off our house renovations, and it really feels like we're coming to the end of a cycle here. And I mean, we've been talking about moving out of Tamworth for ages, but it just hasn't happened. And I still don't know for sure if it's going to happen. Don't tell my husband that because he's pretty set on moving, but I'm just not sure what we're doing. So, but yeah, I feel like it's interesting how it's lining up with that Jupiter return cycle. So yeah, we'll see what happens there. So your fourth Jupiter return is possibly around ages 47 to 48. And maybe at this age, depending on how old you were when you had kids, this could be an age where you're having grandkids. It might also be a time when you have a career change or even go through a midlife crisis. In our 40s, we do have quite a few different astrological transits that we go through. We'll go through our Uranus opposition around age 42. So in our early 40s, and our Uranus opposition is often when we do have that midlife crisis where we want to change. We feel this like really forceful energy to, I don't know, like find a bit of balance, this push-pull effect, that something's got to give, that something's got to change. And again, this can be very dependent on your natal chart and what's going on for you, as well as all the other transiting planets at the time. But this can kind of have an impact on what will happen with that fourth Jupiter return around age 48. The other thing that happens around this time of your fourth Jupiter return is the Chiron return. So Chiron takes around 50-ish years to go right around the zodiac to come back to where it was when you were born. And again, this can contribute to a midlife crisis. I, over the last few years, as I've been a bit more into astrology, I have done so many readings for people who are going through their Chiron return. And in my own personal life, I've known a lot of 50-ish year olds who have been having a really tough time. And it's like, okay, I know exactly what's going on for you. It's your Chiron return. And it's around the same age, like our Jupiter returns, that we go through this Chiron return around age 50. Because Chiron can move a bit more slowly, we may start to feel the effects of our Chiron return maybe about age 48, and it may even last through to about age 52. And again, it can be a bit longer as well, depending on what's happening with the planets and all that sort of thing in your chart. So but at that fourth Jupiter return at around age 48, just be wary that there can be these other factors going on as well that can make that fourth Jupiter return maybe a little bit more challenging compared to the other Jupiter returns because you've got the Chiron return, you've got the Uranus opposition earlier in that decade, and all this other stuff that might be affecting that. And then at 60 years old, this is often when we have our fifth Jupiter return, right? It's another multiple of 12. At 60 years old, this may be when you're starting to look ahead for retirement. You might even be retiring early, or there may be like a sense of achievement here as you maybe get into like a senior position. You're perhaps teaching others, mentoring others, or teaching others in the workplace, or that sort of thing. I feel like that fifth Jupiter return at 60 years old is probably a really fun one because you kind of you're a bit older, you're a bit wiser, you've been through a few Jupiter returns, and so it can be a really fun cycle that's beginning there at 60 years old as you kind of move into a more fun stage of your life. I can't wait to retire, even though I don't go to work full time or anything, but I just feel like how much fun and freedom you can have once you've worked hard during your younger years, and then you can go traveling and do all sorts of fun things. I look at like some of my grandparents and just the fun that they've been able to have since they've retired. So yeah, it looks fun. Anyways, so there's a bit of a brief overview about what to expect with your Jupiter returns going through those ages. Now let's talk about the Jupiter return chart, because this is where we can get a bit more specific into exactly what's going to come up with you for your Jupiter return. So to pull up a Jupiter return chart, you'll want to find maybe using an ephemeris. I like to use astro-seeker.com. They have an ephemeris on there where you're going to find the exact date that Jupiter comes to your natal Jupiter degree. Okay, so like I said earlier, my natal Jupiter is at 19 degrees Gemini. So I will want to find the exact date that Jupiter comes back to 19 degrees Gemini. Okay, that exact degree in that exact sign as it was when you were born. Okay, so you will then pull up a whole new chart for that time. There may be other websites that even pull up a Jupiter return chart. I'm not sure if astro.com may pull this up for you for free as well. I use Astro Gold software, which is absolutely amazing. If you're a bit more serious about astrology, maybe you're an astrologer, it's absolutely worth it. I think it was about $300 to buy this Astro Gold software. So it is a bit of an investment, but if you are making natal charts and that sort of thing quite regularly, it's such a great tool, and it makes like these Jupiter return charts so much easier. But anyway, there's heaps of ways that you can do this without spending money on software if that's not your thing. So anyway, you want to bring up a whole new chart for your Jupiter return. And like depending on like what time of year and that sort of thing, like, you know, the sun's going to be in a completely different sign and whatever compared to your natal chart, that's fine. We just want that Jupiter right back to that exact degree as it was when you were born. Okay, so once you've got that Jupiter return chart, come back because I'm going to tell you what to look at next. All right, so hopefully you've got your Jupiter return chart in front of you, and if you have ever read a solar return chart, reading a Jupiter return chart is similar, except in a solar return chart, you're focusing on the sun. So if you're not familiar with a solar return chart, it is, I like to think of it as a birthday reading, because you go through your solar return every year around your birthday, give or take a day either side, dependent on the year. And that's when the sun comes back to that exact same degree as your natal sun, right? So we're doing the same sort of thing here, but with Jupiter. We're bringing up a Jupiter return chart and we're going to read your Jupiter return chart, which gives you a bit of a flavor for like what's going to come up with this Jupiter cycle over these next 12 or so years as part of your new Jupiter cycle, which is super exciting. So what you'll want to find on your Jupiter return chart is what house is Jupiter in. We already know what sign Jupiter is going to be in. We already know what degree Jupiter is going to be at, because it's the same as your natal chart. So you don't have to worry about that. We just want to find out what house it's going to be in. Okay, because your house is going to tell you what area of your life is going to really mostly be affected by this Jupiter return in this 12-year cycle that's coming up. So that Jupiter, whatever house Jupiter is in, yeah, it's going to tell you maybe what to focus on, what area is going to be abundant, maybe what area to lean into for these next 12 years. So I'm assuming that if you're listening and you've gone this far, that you probably already have an understanding of the houses. So I'm not going to go through all the houses, but I will just say that like if like you're here now and you're like, Kyra, I have no idea how to read my Jupiter return chart. I don't even know how to bring up this chart. Did you know I also offer readings? So you can book in a reading with me and I can just tell you all these things yourself. And I do all the hard work for you. But anyway, so we want to look at what house Jupiter is in. That's going to tell you your theme for the year ahead. The other thing that you want to look at on your Jupiter return chart is what aspects are other planets making with Jupiter. So when I brought up my Jupiter return chart for yesterday, when Jupiter was exact, my natal Jupiter, Jupiter is making a sextile aspect with Chiron. So Chiron is the asteroid of healing and deep wounds, and making a sextile aspect, it brings opportunities. It also brings ease, like things just a bit more comfortable. They're a bit more easy with a sextile aspect. So for me, I'm already saying that this 12-year cycle ahead is actually going to bring opportunities for me to heal. It's going to help me to heal like deep wounds that may have been carried in from past lives, or even things that have been present throughout my whole life, sort of thing. So yeah, this is looking like it's going to be a really healing cycle for me, which is super exciting. So there may be other aspects going on, and again, I'm not going to go through all of these things because this could take all day. But looking at just what angles Jupiter is making with other planets on that Jupiter return chart, and that's going to give you a bit more information about what to expect for these 12 years ahead. Okay, we're just like setting the scene for these 12 years ahead for this Jupiter cycle. So what other significant transiting aspects are on this Jupiter return chart? So we do want to focus a lot on Jupiter on the Jupiter return chart, but there may be other really significant things happening. There may be like a conjunction, there might be triple conjunctions, or even a stellium somewhere in the chart. There might be other interesting aspects going on, maybe some oppositions or squares or something else. So having a look at that chart as a whole and seeing what's going on there, you might find all sorts of interesting things, and just reading that in the view of like that's like the sort of energy that's going to be coming up for your Jupiter return cycle, like for these next 12 years. So like, yeah, again, like what sort of areas could be affecting this cycle? What sort of things might be, just coming up over these next 12 years. So when we're looking at a Jupiter return chart or a solar return chart or anything like that, we can kind of do a bit of like a synastry with your natal chart. So usually in a synastry chart where we're looking at two astrology charts together, you would have your natal chart in the middle, and then you'd have transits on the outside. Now for a Jupiter return chart or a solar return or any other sort of return chart, we actually want to do the opposite, okay? You're going to have your Jupiter return chart in the middle, and then have your natal chart on the outside, so that we're preserving the houses of the Jupiter return chart, okay? Because like I said right at the start of this section, that we want to find out what house that Jupiter is in on the Jupiter return chart. So we just want to keep those houses there, because that's probably the most important thing with this Jupiter return chart. So putting your natal chart on the outside, so you might see, or of course we're going to have one like synastry conjunction here. We're going to have Jupiter conjunct Jupiter, because on your Jupiter return chart, obviously Jupiter is at that same degree as your natal Jupiter. But maybe there are other aspects going on. Maybe other planets on your natal chart are making an aspect to Jupiter, which I mean, that will also be the same aspects that these planets are making to your natal Jupiter as well. So that will give you an idea of like what to expect with your Jupiter return anyway, because it's activating your natal Jupiter. So it's also going to be activating any of those natal aspects that you may have to your natal Jupiter as well. But then looking at also your natal planets and any other aspects that they may be making to other planets on that Jupiter return chart, because that may also be quite significant for understanding the sort of energies that might be coming up in this 12-year cycle ahead. The other thing that you want to look for here on the Jupiter return chart is looking for any planets that may be at 0 degrees or 29 degrees. So 0 degrees, planets at 0 degrees, as they just enter that zodiac sign, this sort of energy is just beginning. Okay, 0 degrees is obviously like that first degree of the zodiac. So any planets that are at 0 degrees, that sort of energy is just kind of beginning. So maybe if you have, say, Mars at 0 degrees on the Jupiter return chart, then there might be like some sort of new beginning with your motivation, with your drive, with all the things that Mars rules, with your assertiveness. Just having a look at if any planets are at 0 degrees, and then 29 degrees being at the last degree on in a zodiac sign. This can bring endings. So looking at that Jupiter return chart for any planets that may be at 29 degrees. So if you're going through your Jupiter return right now, you may have Pluto at 29 degrees. Pluto is currently at 29 degrees Capricorn. So there might be this ending happening with like how you're transforming, how you're evolving. You might be coming to the end of like an era, so to speak. And that ending might be a significant theme that is present in this Jupiter cycle, this 12-year cycle that's starting at your Jupiter return. The other thing to be aware of with the Jupiter return chart is that Jupiter does go into retrograde for a few months every year. So depending year to year, you may find that your Jupiter return might actually happen 3 times because it will go past your natal Jupiter degree, and then it will retrograde back over that point, and then it will have to cross over that point again as it continues to move forward. So in that case, and this may not happen for you every year, but you may have that happen sometime. And when there is that Jupiter retrograde in that Jupiter return chart, it can just force you to slow down and maybe reevaluate before moving forward. There might be like a bit of a slowness to this new cycle that's maybe just forcing you to take a step back and just, reevaluating before moving ahead. So if that is happening for you, this is actually what's happening to me this year. I was looking back, I was like, has this happened every year? And no, I think this is like literally perhaps the only time in my lifetime I think that that this is happening. And I think it also, like as I was talking before about like possibly moving out of Tamworth and things, it kind of makes sense because like we're not ready to move, we're just not ready. So it feels like there's a bit of a delay. So by the time Jupiter gets back to cross over my natal Jupiter in April next year, I kind of feel like maybe that's when we'll be ready, because we're just not ready yet. So if that is you though, if you do have that Jupiter retrograde affecting your Jupiter return, making sure that you look at all 3 charts for every time that Jupiter is going to be crossing over your natal Jupiter, because that will give you a bit of understanding about that energy, maybe the things that you need to look at, that you need to reevaluate before moving forward. So how to harness your Jupiter return cycle. I'll touch on this before we finish off for today's episode. This has been a big episode already by my standards. So thanks for sticking with me. I hope that this has been helpful so far. But anyway, how to harness your Jupiter return cycle. So once you've had a look at your Jupiter return chart, you may start to see like what themes are coming up, and maybe you're seeing like, okay, like this is the area of my life that's having a new beginning in this 12-year cycle. So maybe you've already got an idea of what area of your life you need to lean into. Jupiter itself rules things like study, because it's all about like expansion, right? So expanding the mind through study. It might be to do with traveling or relocating, like that physical movement, going to different locations. It may be to do with new spiritual practices, or even going down a new spiritual path, as well as going deep into your passions and the things that bring you joy. So you may harness your Jupiter return cycle through doing any of those things. Maybe starting a new course, maybe you're starting a new spiritual practice. Maybe you're deciding to move to a new town. This sounds familiar, doesn't it? Maybe you go deep into your passion. Maybe you want to write a book, and maybe that's your big project for the 12 years ahead. You're going to like write this massive book, or maybe a series of books or something. So yeah, it will depend on like where Jupiter is on that return chart and what's happening with your natal Jupiter and all those different things. So yeah, it will be up to you, I guess, how to harness that energy based on what's happening. But there are some sort of generic ways that you can harness that Jupiter return energy. So like I said earlier, if this is like all going over your head and you're like, oh my gosh, Kyra, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea even how to bring up my Jupiter return chart or what any of this means, I've totally got your back. I can read your chart for you. So you can book in a reading with me at kyrahowearth.com/readings, or you can look in the show notes below to find out exactly how to book in a reading. I feel like if we all just understood more about these natural cycles that we go through, whether that's our Jupiter return, our Chiron return, or like anything else that happens, our Pluto square, like there's so many of these like big lifetime transits that we all go through. I feel like if we had more of a understanding of these, that our life would really run so much more smoother, and we wouldn't be like, oh, like, why am I like having this healing crisis right now? Why are these health issues flaring up? Or like all these different things that tend to happen. I just feel that if we have this understanding, it can help us so much more to just understand the bigger picture of why we might be going through certain things, and going through these different phases of our life. So if you do want to know more about your Jupiter return and what to expect for this 12-year cycle ahead, definitely book in for a reading. I would love to check out what's going on with your Jupiter return chart and give you those insights. So maybe you have got through this episode and you followed along step by step to bring up your own Jupiter return chart and looked at all those things that I've mentioned. I would love to know, like, what is coming up for your Jupiter return? What Jupiter return are you going through? Is this your second, your third, your fourth, your fifth, or even beyond? I would love to know. And what else maybe have you noticed about your previous Jupiter returns? Like, maybe you've noticed that something significant happened at ages 12 or 24 or 36 or so forth. I would love to know. If you can comment on this episode, depending on where you're listening to today, feel free to comment. Otherwise, feel free to send me a message on Instagram at kyrahowearth.official. Start up that conversation. I would love to know what's coming up for you with your Jupiter return. So thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope that this episode was really insightful for finding out more about your Jupiter return and looking forward to this 12-year cycle ahead. It is a really exciting time, and it is really opening up a new cycle of growth and opportunity. And it's a new beginning. It is really exciting. There is so much potential here with that Jupiter return energy. So if you are going through this time, congratulations. How exciting for you. I will catch you all on the next episode of the Moon Manifesting Podcast. For now, stay magical, stay manifesting, and stay tuned. I'll talk with you all again really soon. Bye for now. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Moon Manifesting Podcast. If you are curious about working with the moon, you can read my book, Moon Manifesting, or join us inside the Moon Manifesting Coven. You'll find the links in the show notes, or go to kyrahowearth.com.